When I was growing up as a kid, my father provided my brother and I with a pretty nice living. I mean, we weren't rich or anything, but we never wanted. Now, how he did this? Well, like anybody else. He had his own business and he worked his ass off. And so, yeah, he provided for his family. But that's not really where he built his wealth. He did this through the real estate market. You see, back in about the 1970s or so, maybe even 1970, he bought a home in San Jose, California, and fixed it up, and eventually he sold it at a pretty nice profit, rolled that over into a home in Palo Alto, California. This home he really expanded. I mean, he probably tripled the size of it and put a lot of work into it, a lot of time. We lived there for a good long while. I grew up there, and he sold that. And yeah, he did pretty well. By this time, it's Silicon Valley after all, right? So housing prices, pretty good for the seller anyway. Well, he went off and did a few things, but eventually he went off to Telluride, Colorado, and bought a bed and breakfast, fixed it up, did a whole lot of great things. He also flipped some homes and made some pretty good money there. In other words, the real estate market was really good to my father when it came to wealth accumulation. That is until, the late 2000s, and he sold his bed and breakfast, took all his money, and put it into building a brand new home there in Telluride, Colorado. I mean, we're talking a really nice luxury home. Now, this thing was going to make him millions. This was going to take care of his retirement as far as the eye could see. But by the time he put it on the market, this was 2008. And for those of you playing at home, this is when the housing market bubble absolutely burst. And to make what's already a long story short, he lost everything. Gone, evaporated. All that wealth he had accumulated, gone. Now, my father, ever the stoic pragmatist, when he talks about this, he's not really that concerned. He says, the housing market, it was pretty good until it wasn't. Now, obviously, my father wasn't the only one who made a lot of money and lost a lot of money when the housing market crashed. This happened to a lot of people, maybe even people who you know. Mark Twain once said, "Buy land, they're not making it anymore." Like him, most felt that housing prices will always go up, and so, essentially, housing is a rock-solid investment. On the face of it, this axiom makes good sense. But as 2008 taught us, nothing, no matter how obvious it may seem, should be seen as incontrovertibly true. In the first episode in this series, we talked about how we don't always understand why we do the things we do or the conditions in which these practices originally came about. Much of what we do has become institutionalized over the years, decades, and centuries since the practice was first put in place. This means that we don't question it, we see it as just self-evidently true. This is when the practice becomes a dogma. Now, dogma is one of those words that you kind of hear all the time, and so you generally know what it means, but if you had to define it, it might be a little tricky. So let's define it. A dogma is a principle or practice that has been laid down by some authority as incontrovertibly true. Now, the phrase that should scare the bejesus out of us is incontrovertibly true. This means there's no point in questioning it. You're not even supposed to question it. After all, it's self-evidently true. Now, oftentimes, dogma is used in the context of, say, religion and religious beliefs. But that's not always the case. The DNA of dogma, the idea that something shouldn't be questioned and that it's incontrovertibly true, makes its way into business as well. I mean, let me give you some examples. Regulation hinders growth, stifles innovation, and makes things more expensive for consumers. The private sector is more efficient than the public sector. Capitalism is the best and most moral economic system on the face of the earth. Employees are primarily motivated by money. Now, I'm willing to bet that you've heard some of these before, and in fact, maybe they've been offered to you as incontrovertibly true, just something we know to be true. You don't even need to bother questioning it. Now, I'm not saying that these ideas don't hold water, but incontrovertibly true? I'm not so sure about that. In the end, it's important to remember that when we blindly allow dogma to direct our personal and business decisions, we abdicate our role as autonomous beings. Now, closely related to dogma are axioms. Axioms and dogma are pretty much the same sort of thing. The only difference is an axiom is kind of a short little motto, if you will, sort of a branding quib, something that is easy to remember and rolls off the tongue very quickly. For example, Mark Twain's quote about buy land, they're not making it anymore. That's sort of an axiom, something you've heard over and over and has just kind of worked its way into our culture and psyche as self-evidently true. Other axioms include things like, follow your passion and you'll never work a day of your life. If you're smart, work hard, play by the rules, you'll be successful. You can be anything you want to be. All you need to do is set your mind to it. Build it and they will come. It's this last one, build it and they will come, that's my favorite. I mean, we can only imagine how many boardrooms and committees had this as their rallying cry as they were talking about building a new stadium or a new mall or a new center of some sort or another. But here's the thing. Do you know where that saying came from, that particular axiom? Well, that's what makes this particularly bizarre. It's from a 1989 movie called Field of Dreams, in which Kevin Costner, an Iowa corn farmer, on the advice of a burned-out 60s icon, plows under his crop and builds a baseball diamond, all in the hopes that the ghost of his dead father will come and play catch with him. Now, this particular example makes me think of something that Edward Ng said once. He said, sometimes there is a danger in using an application without remembering the source. Without keeping the source of an idea in one's mind, it's easy to make false associations. I can't imagine a better example of this principle. The source of this axiom, build it and they will come, comes from some weird-ass Kevin Costner movie where he wanted to play catch with the ghost of his dead father. And yet we are taking the same idea and applying it to multi-million-dollar business decisions, as though it is self-evidently true. Now, you might say, hold up, Lon, a lot of these dogmas and axioms that you've been sharing, they've been proven to be true. Well, the term proven is a scientific term. This means that the idea has been proven to be true by means of the scientific method. Therefore, it can be considered a fact, not a dogma, not an axiom. And in fact, it's not even an opinion or a belief. For more information about that, see our previous video on facts, opinions, and beliefs. Anyway, there are, of course, many scientific facts out there. Facts like the Earth is round and vaccines prevent disease. Sound travels at 1,125 feet per second, or somewhere around there. And smoking cigarettes causes cancer. These are scientific facts that have been observed, measured, and proven to be true by means of the scientific method. However, science is different from dogma, not just in that it is observed and measured and proven to be true. Science is what we call self-correcting. This means that science is always skeptical of itself, always critical of itself, always challenging itself, and always trying to come to a closer, fuller understanding of what truth is. By contrast, dogma, it's not self-correcting. There's nothing to correct, so says dogma. After all, it's incontrovertibly true, so what is there to correct? This means that while science really welcomes and embraces skepticism, Dogma and axioms have no place for skepticism at all. And this brings us to critical thinking. Now, critical thinking is the friend of science, but the arch nemesis of dogma. And that's what we're going to discuss in our next video. We're going to learn how critical thinking can help us analyze, assess, and reconstruct our thinking such that we can get closer to the truth. After all, if we don't practice critical thinking, we're pretty much letting dogma make all our decisions for us. We're walking through life on autopilot like an automaton. We do not want that. We want to use critical thinking to understand the best course of action given our circumstance, given our value set. So stick with me for our next video and let's delve into this. Until then, have a fantastic day. Hey, thanks for joining me today. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more, check out these over here. Of course, I'd always like to invite you to subscribe to my channel, so you can do that right there. And finally, if you want to contribute, be a part of the conversation, please do so. Leave comments below, and let's play with these ideas together. After all, that's the fun part of all this. All right? Thanks a lot. We'll see you later.